So over the last few weeks, we have been traveling through the Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of Mark, as I think I've said to you before, is pretty quick. It is really fast, and only in a few verses, lots of things happen. And last week, we heard the story of a couple miracle healings. These healings were really stunning. They were miracles, but we also heard that there's a way to tweak the understanding of those stories in the sense that the miracle may have been that someone received their sight, but actually, the people around who witnessed what had happened believed. And that is perhaps the best miracle. Because you see, Jesus didn't stay in the area that he was supposed to stay in. As a good Jewish rabbi, he was supposed to only be within a certain boundary, but he would constantly leave that area. And last week and this week, he is out afield. He is around people who are not Jewish. They have no context of who he is and what he's supposed to be and what even Messiah means. And yet they see what he does and they are amazed and they believe. That has happened between last week's gospel and this week's gospel, so much so that Jesus takes his disciples aside this week. He takes them aside and he asks them an important question. Who do the crowds say that I am? And they start to throw stuff against the wall, like maybe this, maybe that. And then Peter has this moment of insight. Peter kind of gets it. And Peter says, you are the Messiah. And I can only imagine how excited Jesus was. They get it. And then Peter turns right around and does the wrong thing. And Jesus is disappointed. Discipleship is kind of like that. Discipleship is sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. We understand that kind of discipleship. And so as we're thinking through the question that Jesus asked his disciples, I think it's important for us to think of that same question. Who do we say that Jesus is? Who do you say that Jesus is? Until we have a pretty clear idea, it's difficult to commit to being a disciple. Until we actually understand who we think Jesus is, then all the other stuff that comes with discipleship and identity seems like just extra work, and none of us need extra work. Once we figure out who we believe Jesus to be, then what Jesus asks of us to become more and more like him, that sort of becomes an assumption. Of course we wish to do that. And even when we get it right and get it wrong, we are never alone. We are always together in that effort. This past summer, a good friend of mine went to a wedding in Morocco. And it was a family wedding because he married a Moroccan girl. And although he's, white guy from America, he has learned a lot about the Moroccan culture, but he doesn't often get over to Morocco to do all of the big stuff. Now, a lot of people think that Episcopalians can throw a good party, but the Moroccans, they've got us beat. Like many cultures around the world, weddings are not one nice evening out where you hope there's a decent bar. Like most cultures, weddings go for days and days and days. And finally, after many days of celebrating, they had gotten to the big moment where the bride and groom, they were now married, and this was the big party. And it went so long. Dinner wasn't served until 2 a.m., and the party didn't end until after sunrise. They know how to do it. And all the while in this party, they're doing all kinds of cultural stuff. They are singing songs that everyone knows since they're a child. They're playing instruments. They're dancing. It is this constant excitement and energy. But you see, he's not from that culture. And although he had learned a little bit, he hadn't learned a lot. But as the night progressed and people were getting up and dancing, he was kind of moved to perhaps dance himself. Now, to say that my friend is a dancer is unfair. And to say that he even has rhythm is a bit too generous. But he felt moved to get up and dance. And the most remarkable thing happened. So he gets up and he starts to move toward the dance floor. And everyone around realized that here goes the white guy gonna dance at the Moroccan wedding. And they started to cheer. And they cheered louder and more loudly than they had for anyone else who got up to dance, because they understood that he was stepping out of his comfort zone, that he was doing something that was quite scary, but he was doing it because he wanted to belong. He wanted to be part of that community. Now, I love that story, not because I can only imagine him doing this, but because what we do on Sunday mornings is just like this. We come together on Sundays to celebrate. That's what this is. What we are doing right now is really only a celebration. There are lots of churchy things that go into it, but fundamentally, it's meant to be the party, the celebration of whatever we've done last week and whatever we can do this week. We get together for this celebration. And there are people who come to this party looking to belong to the community, and they show up. And there's a little bit of fear there. People show up. They've mustered the courage to actually come through these doors and sit in these pews among most of us who know what we're doing. Most of us have been here for years, maybe decades, maybe our entire life. And so all the weird stuff that we do in our worship services makes sense to us. The sit, the stand, the kneel, the songs that we sing, the prayers that we say, all of that seems pretty natural and normal, except can you just put yourself in the place of a person who has never been in an Episcopal service? It's weird, y'all. And they're here anyway. They come here looking for God, looking for an experience with the divine. And they are courageous enough to be sitting right here with us. And so I can only imagine what it would feel like if they had crossed this threshold, were here for the very first time, wondering what all we are doing. But as they try, they would hear the cheers, buoying them along, knowing very explicitly that we want them here. See, Christian community is meant to help us be better, to be more like Christ over time. The behaviors and the habits that we share here are ones that we lift up as something good. But how often do we come here and we might even feel the Spirit and we feel good and we can even say yes to who Jesus actually is, and yet we walk out these doors and we go back to normal life because what we do in church stays in church. We don't take church out with us, but we should. What we do here should actually inform what we do out there. What we do here should actually help correct us and root us in an identity we wish to have so that the behaviors, the habits, the actions we take between Sunday celebrations actually reflect more and more what we believe is happening here. That is so hard. And we see how hard that is when we look at today's gospel lesson, because yes, Peter had a moment of insight where Jesus says, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says the right thing, "You are the Messiah." But then, right after Jesus is excited that they get it, he then begins to explain what that means. What does it mean to be the Messiah? What does it mean to live out his call? What does it mean to be Christ in the world? And what that means is that he will be hurt. He will suffer, he will die, and Peter says, not on my watch, that Jesus is never going to do that. Because even though Peter had this moment of insight, Peter goes right back to what he thinks he's supposed to do and what he thinks he's supposed to believe based on what the world says. And then what does Jesus say right after Peter has that insight? "Get behind me, Satan." Peter tried. And he got it right for a moment, and yet the world came rushing right back in when stuff got hard. And when Jesus started talking about the way the world would be hard, Peter couldn't take it. We're that way too. We may come here with all good intention, really kind of loving this, and perhaps even believing this. And the world will get hard right after we leave this space. And it is so easy for us to go right back to the habits and the beliefs that we have. It is so easy to go right back to living the way that the world would have us live. And right now, the world is pressuring all of us to live in very specific ways. You're in, you're out, you're right, you're left, you're all those different things. That is not of God. The behaviors that we have, the habits that we have in the world, the way that we treat other people should begin right here. Because not only are those of us who've been around for a while coming here to be refilled and redirected and recorrected, but there are people sitting in the pews right now who are here for the first time looking for that same inspiration and transformation, and we are meant to support one another in all of those efforts. Not a one of us is done, not a one of us gets it all right, and yet we are not alone. Look at this room. We are not alone. We get to use our gifts as beloved children of God to try to help them make the world a better place. And every time we fail together. And hopefully, we fail better over time. We are called to do something remarkable, to bear witness to the power of love and grace in the world. And we do not do this alone. As we leave today, I invite you to let the energy of God's presence fill you up so that you get the best chance possible to actually make a change in the way you live this week. And even when you try and you miss the mark, know that next week the party continues and you can come right back here and get refilled and you can try again. Because no matter what we do, God will love us. And no matter how good or bad we do, God will love us, love each one of you, and we can try again together. Let us pray. God, we come to you today humble that who we know you to be is not always who we allow you to influence in our behavior day to day. May each of us in our weaknesses be filled with your Spirit that we can try to strive to live more and more like you this week, and then to come back again next week and be refilled once again to try again, and that in the trying, we grow closer and closer to you, to the people you've created us to be. And we ask this all in the Son's name. Amen.